What exactly do you hope to accomplish this week?
I hope, I would say, to resynchronize in a certain way and build new ambitions for the future.
Have they been out of synchron?
I think so regarding some economic issues. Why? Because I think we're perfectly working closely together when we speak about war, when we speak about Ukraine, when we speak about geopolitics. But when you look at the situation after February this year, gas, energy prices are skyrocketing in Europe because we are buyers and not producers.
Americans think they're skyrocketing here too.
But the situation is very different. When you take oil, perhaps. But when I look at the gas prices paid by your companies and the European companies, this is absolutely not the same level. But on top of that, a series of decisions. I can completely understand, and I do share the perspective of this decision. CHIPS Act, Inflation Reduction Act are perhaps very good for the US economy. But as they were not properly coordinated with the European economies, they create just the absence of level playing field.
You're the first French president ever to have two state visits to the United States. Of course, the first one was under President Trump. He announced 2 weeks ago that he's going to run for president again. What would it mean for the relationship between the U.S. and France if Donald Trump became president again?
First, I try not to make any type of political fiction, as I am not...
Political fiction?
I'm not a commentator, I'm a player of this party. And,
but you'll be president if he's re-elected president.
I never speculate about future outcomes of elections in my country, so I will not do so for the others. I'm very much engaged, and my willingness is for the 2 years to come to deliver the maximum results with President Biden's administration.
Let's talk about the war in Ukraine. Is Ukraine winning the war right now?
Ukraine is clearly having a very positive counter-offensive. Saying they are winning the war is probably too early.
How about Vladimir Putin? You said you expected to speak with him again. Do you know when you're going to speak with him?
Yes.
When?
In the coming days. I wanted first to have the state visit and have in-depth discussion with President Biden and our teams together.
Do you have a vision of what a successful peace looks like?
It's a sustainable one.
What does that mean?
It's the two parties to decide, and the rest of the international community to be here to guarantee and to protect. But what I do believe is that it's a good peace is not a peace which will be imposed to the Ukrainians by others. Number one, a good peace is not a peace which will not be accepted on the mid to long run by one of the two parties.
Is a man who's capable of making a decision like that capable of negotiating what you call a good peace?
This is exactly the question.
I know. What's the answer?
If I had the answer, I would be around the negotiating table with him and somebody in charge.
Is he still rational is the question.
I do hope, I do believe in that. My conviction and my pragmatic approach is to say, I have to engage with the existing leaders and the one in charge of their country. Because if we do believe in national sovereignty, we cannot decide to say the precondition is a regime change to start negotiating. I think he made mistakes. Is it impossible to come back at the table and negotiate something? I think it's still possible.
You've talked about a crisis of democracies around the world. What does that mean?
Look, I think all the Western democracies are under very strong pressure. We see the extremes rising. We clearly see in our societies a sort of fascination for authoritarianism, the big transformation of this past 10 to 15 years. Social networks. I can come from my Twitter account or post on my Facebook or Instagram account a very long message. I'm called Xelinot. I don't know what. Nobody knows who I am, but I have a very convincing narrative saying crazy things about a vaccine, a pandemic, the war, and I will bring together some piece of evidence with no link, no verification. The beginning of a doubt. Doubt is good, but when it is based on argumentation and we start on the same ground.
Right now we're facing a situation where just in the last couple of days, Elon Musk has said he's going to relax all the content moderation policies, COVID misinformation back on Twitter. He's making it worse, isn't he?
I think this is a big issue. I think it deserves to be largely engaged. What I push very much forward is exactly the opposite, more regulation. And regulation is not...
Can you do that in France on Twitter?
We did, and we are implementing it. And we did it at the European level. Free speech in democracy is based on respect and public order. You can demonstrate, you can have free speech, you can write what you want, but there is responsibilities and limits. The limit is that you cannot go in the streets and have a racist speech or anti-Semitic speech. You cannot put at risk the life of somebody else. Violence is never legitimate in democracy. And this is, for me, what is very important to defend now. In democracy, you can change your leaders. You can change the one who will represent you.
Accept the change.
And vote you. Yeah. And the point is, as long as you have these rules, you are not entitled to be violent. You decide the one. But you not go to the street. You can go to the street to protest, to demonstrate through your words, but you have to accept, at a point of time, the rule of democracy. And when in one of the biggest democracies and the oldest democracies of this world, you can have leaders and supporters deciding on purpose to refuse the result, because this is the one they didn't want to see. This is just the beginning of the end of the democracy. And I think whatever you think, whatever your side could be, is just, we have to protect the model where we stand, because what is the alternative of this model? Perhaps it's not perfect, I do agree. Perhaps, especially when you belong to the minority where you lose an election, you are not happy with the outcome. I imagine that a lot of Democrats were not happy in 2016. Did they invaded Capitol Hill? No. So my strong belief is that we have to stick to the rules, because this institution and the democratic framework is much more important than in any others.